Your tips are mine. Every dollar you make under this roof belongs to this family, and I am this family." That was the first thing he said when I came home from my shift at the restaurant, still smelling like fryer oil and floor cleaner, $32 in cash tucked into my apron pocket. I was 19. He had been living with us for 14 months. I handed it over, all of it. My mother watched from the kitchen doorway. She didn't say anything. She never said anything. His name was my stepfather. That's what my mother wanted me to call him, though I never once used the word dad. He came into our lives when I was 17, a few months after my father passed. My mother met him at her grief support group, which I still find almost too cruel to say out loud. He was charming then, soft-spoken. He brought her flowers from the grocery store and fixed the leaking tap under the sink. He told me I was the woman of the house and that he respected that. By the time I turned 18, he was opening my mail. By 19, he had convinced my mother to add him to her bank account. By 20, he had her convinced that I was the problem. I worked at a restaurant in Mississauga, about a 20-minute bus ride from the house. Double shifts on weekends, closing on weeknights. I was saving for college, or trying to. Every time I hid money, he found it. In my sock drawer, in the lining of my winter coat, inside a hollowed-out book I thought was clever. He always found it, and he always had a reason. The heat bill, the grocery run, my mother's car insurance. "You live here, you contribute," he said, like I was a tenant, like I was a stranger in my own mother's house. I grew up in that house. My father painted my bedroom ceiling dark blue with little white dots, constellations he called them, when I was 6 years old. My name is still scratched into the baseboard behind my desk from when I was 8 and thought I was being rebellious. That house was mine before he ever set foot in it. But I stayed for my mother. She had panic attacks after my father died. She couldn't drive on the highway for 2 years. She needed someone, and for a while I convinced myself that he was helping her, even if he was hurting me. That stopped being enough sometime around last February. I had been saving up again. Carefully this time, cash tips only, kept in a Ziploc bag taped behind the cold water pipe under the bathroom sink. I had just over $400. I was going to use it for a college application fee and a bus pass for the semester. He found it on a Saturday morning. I don't know how. I still don't know how. But I came downstairs and he was sitting at the kitchen table with a Ziploc bag in front of him, and he had that look on his face, the one that was very calm and very still, which was always worse than when he was loud. My mother was at the stove. She didn't turn around. "You've been lying to me," he said. I told him it was my money. I told him I earned it. He stood up slowly. That was always the warning. When he stopped sitting, when he stood up to his full height, like he was reminding me of something. He was a big man. He had worked in construction before he stopped working entirely and started living off my mother's disability payments. I said I was leaving. I said I was done. I turned toward the hallway to go upstairs and get my bag, and I was going to walk out that door and never come back, and that's when I heard it, the drawer opening, the one beside the stove where my mother kept her cooking tools, and I found out that moment, apparently, other things too. The sound was specific. I have no other way to describe it. It was a sound that rearranged everything I understood about that moment. I was already moving when it happened. Already halfway to the hallway. The shot hit the wall to my left first, and then something tore through my right side, just below my ribs, and the pain was so immediate and so total that I didn't understand it right away. My body understood before my brain did. I was on the floor. I was looking up at the light fixture in the hallway. One of the bulbs was still out, the one my mother had been asking him to replace for 6 months. I heard him say something. I heard my mother make a sound I had never heard her make before, high and strange. I got up. I don't know how. I got up and I went out the front door and I didn't stop. It was February in Ontario, and I was in a t-shirt, and I was bleeding. The street was quiet. It was early enough on a Saturday that nobody was out. I made it to the end of the block, and my legs went soft, and I sat down on a bus bench, and I tried to breathe, and I couldn't figure out if I was breathing or not. There was a man on the bench. I hadn't seen him when I sat down. He was on the far end, bundled in a dark parka, a thermos between his hands, watching the street like he had been there a while. He was older, maybe 60, maybe 65, with short grey hair and a face that was very still and very present at the same time, the way some people's faces are. He looked at me. I couldn't speak. I don't know if it was the cold or the shock or the blood loss, but my voice was completely gone. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. He didn't look away. He didn't pull out his phone. He just watched me with this steady, focused attention, and something in his expression shifted. Not panic, not alarm exactly, but a kind of recognition, like he had seen people in crisis before and knew what to do with that information. I pressed my hand to my side and held it up so he could see. Then, without thinking, I still don't know why I did this, I had taken 1 semester of ASL at my high school as an elective. I started signing, just fragments. Help. Hurt. Please. He sat up straight. He set down his thermos very carefully on the bench beside him, and then he signed back. I understand you. Don't move. Help is coming. I stared at him. He had already reached into his coat pocket for his phone and was dialing. He kept his eyes on me the whole time he was on the call, one hand up in a gesture that meant stay with me. He spoke quietly and clearly into the phone, gave the address of the street corner, said there was a young woman with a gunshot wound, said to hurry. Then he put the phone away and he moved down the bench toward me and he took off his coat, just took it off in the February cold, in a grey wool sweater underneath and draped it over my shoulders. And he signed, "You are safe now. I have you." I cried. I hadn't cried yet, through any of it. But I cried then. The paramedics arrived in 6 minutes. I know because I counted, staring at the clock on the man's phone that he held where I could see it, because he had somehow understood that I needed an anchor, that I needed to know time was still passing in a normal way. At the hospital, they told me the bullet had cracked a rib and nicked the tissue below my lung, but missed everything critical. The word they used was lucky, which felt like a strange word for the situation. A police officer came and sat with me. I gave a statement. I gave the address. My stepfather was arrested that afternoon. It was only later, when a second officer came to check on me, that I found out who the man on the bench was. She mentioned his name almost as a footnote, the way people mention things they assume you already know. He was a retired 3-star general, Lieutenant General, Canadian Armed Forces, served for over 30 years. He had been decorated 3 times. He had led humanitarian operations and peacekeeping missions. He had testified before parliamentary committees on veterans' affairs. He was one of the most respected military figures in the country. And he was deaf, had been, partially, since his late 40s from repeated exposure to weapons fire over a career spanning 3 decades. He wore hearing aids but had learned ASL as part of adapting to his own life. And because, he told me later, he believed every person should know at least one more language than they thought they needed. He came to visit me in the hospital the following afternoon. He brought a notepad and a pen and wrote, "I wanted to check on you. I hope that is all right." I wrote back, "More than all right." We talked for 2 hours, about what had happened, about my mother, about what I wanted to do next. He didn't offer advice unless I asked for it. He mostly just listened, or rather, watched in that complete and focused way of his. And when I said things that I expected to have to explain or justify, he just nodded. At one point, I wrote, "I don't know what I'm going to do now. I don't have anywhere to go." He wrote back, "You have time to figure that out. You don't need to know today." Then he wrote, "I know people who help with transitional housing. If you want, I can make some calls. Only if you want." I said yes. What I didn't know then was what was about to start. My stepfather's lawyer was quick. He had a story ready within 48 hours of the arrest, that I had escalated, that I had a history of aggression, that the gun had gone off during a struggle I had initiated. My mother, under what I can only describe as tremendous pressure, gave a statement that was vague enough to support almost any interpretation. And then the videos appeared. Someone, I will never be able to prove it was coordinated, but I know it was, started posting on local Facebook community groups and on a Reddit thread for our suburb, old photos of me from high school, taken out of context. A video from a cousin's birthday party 4 years ago where I was laughing loudly and someone had captioned it, violent and unstable. Someone who claimed to be a former co-worker posted that I had a temper. Another account, created 2 weeks before the posts began, shared a blurry photo of a hole in a wall at a house I had never been inside and said I had done it. It spread, not virally, not the way things go truly viral, but enough that people in the area started sharing it, enough that a local blogger wrote a piece with the headline, "Neighborhood Divided Over Domestic Incident," that quoted anonymous sources close to the family. I found out about it from a nurse who mentioned it gently, the way people do when they're not sure if you know. I sat in that hospital bed and read every post, and I felt something I can only describe as a second injury. The first one I had been prepared for, in some way. I had known for years that something bad was coming, had felt it building like pressure behind glass. But this, the careful, coordinated dismantling of who I was, this was something different. This was the part that made me understand why people stop talking, why victims go quiet, because the story gets so loud and so tangled that the truth starts to feel like just another version among many. I told the Lieutenant General about it when he came back to visit. He read through the posts on my phone. His expression didn't change very much, but there was something in the set of his jaw that I recognized from people who have seen a particular kind of dishonesty before and are not surprised by it, but are not okay with it either. He wrote, "Do you have a lawyer?" I wrote, "I can't afford one." He wrote, "I know someone who does pro bono work for cases like yours. I'd like to connect you if you're willing." He also made 2 other calls that I didn't know about until later. One was to a journalist he trusted, not the local blogger, but a senior reporter at a national outlet who had covered veterans' affairs for years, and who had the instinct to know the difference between a story and manipulation. The other was to someone on the police oversight board, not to interfere with the investigation, but to ensure that the vague statement from my mother was not being used to quietly close the file. He didn't tell me about either of those calls right away. He told me only what I needed to know, when I needed to know it. In retrospect, I understand why. I was barely keeping myself together. The last thing I needed was to feel like I was in the middle of a chess game I didn't understand. The legal proceedings took 4 months. During that time, I was placed in a transitional housing unit in Brampton through a program connected to a women's shelter organisation. I had a small room with a window that faced a parking lot, a shared kitchen, and a caseworker named after someone I will not describe, except to say she had the kind of steadiness that makes you feel, for the first time in a long time, like the ground might hold you. I applied to college. I got in, a 2-year program in social services at a community college in the city. The application fee was waived. I got a new job at a different restaurant, one that paid a proper wage and where I was permitted to keep my own tips. I opened a bank account in my name alone, with a branch that was not anywhere near the neighborhood where I'd grown up. The first time I deposited money and knew no one was going to take it, I stood at the machine for a moment after the transaction was complete and just breathed. My mother called me 3 times during those 4 months. The first 2 times I let it go to voicemail. The third time I picked up and she cried for 10 minutes without saying anything useful and then said, very quietly, "I didn't know he would go that far." I said, "Yes, you did." She didn't deny it. I told her I wasn't ready to talk. I told her that didn't mean I never would be, but that I wasn't ready yet and that she needed to respect that. She said she would. She sounded like someone who had been very small for a very long time and was only just beginning to understand the size of the space she had been folded into. The trial date was set, and then delayed, and then set again. My stepfather's lawyer tried twice to have the charges reduced. Both times the motion was denied. The journalist's article ran 6 weeks into the proceedings. Not a hit piece, not inflammatory, just a careful and well-sourced account of what had actually happened, including interviews with neighbors who had seen me leave the house that morning, a paramedic who confirmed the trajectory of the wound, and a forensic analysis of the social media posts that showed the coordination behind them. The comments section of that article was something I made the mistake of reading once and never again, but the article itself did what it was supposed to do. The local blog quietly deleted their post. The Reddit thread got locked. The Lieutenant General came to the courthouse on the day of sentencing. He sat in the public gallery 3 rows back, and I saw him when I came in, and we nodded at each other, the way people do when words are not the right tool for a moment. My stepfather was sentenced to 7 years. The judge cited the premeditated nature, the evidence of financial and psychological abuse preceding the physical violence, and what she called a deliberate and coordinated attempt to discredit the victim through social media. She used the word egregious twice. When it was over, I walked out into the grey March air and stood on the courthouse steps for a minute by myself. The Lieutenant General came out a few minutes later and stood beside me. We didn't sign anything, we just stood there. After a while, he wrote on his phone and held it out. "How are you?" I thought about it for a real moment instead of giving the automatic answer. Then I wrote back, "I think I'm okay. I think that's different from fine, but I think it's real." He read it and nodded, once, with the particular kind of gravity that means I understand exactly what you mean. My mother and I started meeting for coffee 2 months after the sentencing. Neutral ground, a Tim Hortons equidistant between her house and my apartment. She has started seeing a counsellor. She doesn't make excuses anymore, or at least she tries not to. And when she starts to, I say her name in a certain way and she stops. It's not healed. I don't know if it ever will be completely, but it's honest now, which is more than it was. I started my program in the fall, social services. I chose it because it is the work of paying attention to people who are being ignored, and I know something about what that costs, and I know something about what it means when one person decides to see you instead. The Lieutenant General came to my convocation 2 years later. He sat with my mother in the 2nd row, and I saw them in the crowd when I walked across the stage, and something in my chest rearranged itself very quietly into something that felt like it might hold. He had told me once, in a note written in a hospital room on a February afternoon, that I didn't need to know the next thing yet, that I just needed to get to the next hour, and then the one after that. He was right. I didn't start with anything more than that. And somehow, 1 hour at a time, I made it to this. I think about that bus bench a lot, not the cold, not the blood, though I remember both of those clearly enough, but the specific moment when I ran out of words and used my hands instead, and a stranger understood me anyway. There's something in that I'm still unpacking. What happened to me didn't happen because I was weak. I want to be clear about that, even now. Vincent wasn't able to control me because I lacked something. He was able to do it for as long as he did because I was trying to protect someone else, and that's a different thing entirely. I was watching my mother fall apart after my father died, and I made a choice, not a wise one maybe, but a human one, to stay and absorb what I could, so she wouldn't have to absorb all of it alone. I understand now that it didn't work, that you can't shield someone from a person they've chosen, that the kindest thing I could have done for both of us was leave much sooner. That's the part that took me the longest to work through, not the anger at Vincent, that came and went and settled into something quieter and more manageable than I expected. The harder thing was understanding my own role, not in the sense of blame, but in the sense of clarity. I had been telling myself a story about loyalty that was actually a story about fear, and I couldn't see the difference until I was sitting in a hospital bed in February with a cracked rib and nowhere to go. Edmund Tran, the Lieutenant General, never told me what to do. That's the thing I keep coming back to when I think about what it means to actually help someone. He gave me information, he made introductions, he sat with me in rooms and read what I wrote and responded like my thoughts were worth taking seriously. He understood, in a way that I think only comes from having spent decades making decisions under pressure, that the worst thing you can do for a person in crisis is take the decisions away from them. What I needed wasn't to be rescued. I needed someone to stand close enough that I felt like I could stand up on my own. I've thought a lot about what allowed him to be that person. It wasn't just rank or resources, though those helped. It was something in the way he moved through the world, a combination of clear-eyed judgment and genuine care that I've come to think of as the hardest kind of integrity to maintain, the kind that doesn't announce itself. He saw a young woman bleeding on a bench at 7 a.m, and he didn't look away, didn't reach for his phone to document it, didn't make it about himself. He just signed, "I have you." That's what I want to carry forward into the work I'm doing now. I'm in social services. I sit with people in their worst moments and try not to flinch, and try not to fix things I haven't been asked to fix, and try to hold the line between genuine support and the kind of help that's really about the helper. It's harder than it sounds. Most days I think I'm getting better at it. Lorraine and I are still finding our way. She's doing the work, real work, slow work, the kind that doesn't look dramatic from the outside but costs a lot. I don't know if we'll ever have the relationship I wanted when I was 12 years old and thought she was the strongest person alive. But I think we might have something honest, and I've learned enough now to know that honest is worth more. What this whole thing taught me, more than anything, is that the choices we make when we're frightened define us just as much as the choices we make when we're brave, maybe more. I chose to stay too long, then I chose to get up off that floor, then I chose to sign to a stranger. Each one of those was a decision made under pressure, and none of them felt like courage at the time. They just felt like the next thing. I think that might be what courage actually is.